audience today. It has been 110 degrees for a week and a half right now, and I think our little brains have melted. And we can only do what we can, so bear with us. It's going to be one of those scratching and kibitzing that might go in a different way than usual.
Okay.
Right? Okay. Well, the thing is, we're going to have a little seminar on the 12th and 13th of November. So let's announce our seminar, right? So we're going to have a seminar on the 12th and the 13th of November. Hopefully it's going to be much cooler than it is right now because we're losing our mind. A little bit. So Tami is going to talk about recognizing the tensegrity in the lower limb.
Yeah, about the quality of how the tensegrity and the fascia in the lower limb really get expressed through how the foot changes shape and how we get this kind of deformity of the foot as a result of that pull of the fascia, and how the foot loses a lot of its integrity because the fascia no longer functions the way it should within the foot and within the foot capsule.
And there's a tactile way, when I do all those stretches, I always feel, for instance, when I do an extensor stretch in the hind leg, I can always feel whether the extensor is kind of flexible or not. You can actually
and there is a lot about the quality of the tissue. I always tell people, if you can articulate all the structures and they can glide over each other, you're going to have a way healthier distal limb than if everything is really tight and hard and it's hard for you to actually separate and palpate the structures. That for me is always a good indicator that the foot will be struggling because everything has lost its elasticity and mobility, and as a result its tensegrity.
Right. So, and also the trimming I do is palpating the tink point, the two first one around the articulation. We're going to talk about that, and trimming in 3 dimensions. And again, the hoof is asymmetric. We're looking at the entire horse because obviously you cannot just be focused on the foot only, but as far as trimming goes, it's going to be focused on the foot. But I think we're going to discuss a little bit more some generalities.
Well, there's always that balance of, the foot for me is often an expression of the ability of the limb to move through space, and the ability of the limb to move through space is an expression of the ability of the body to generate motion. But then there is a point at which the shape of the foot locks that pattern of motion into the body. Right. So even if you change the body, the foot is still going to trap how that foot makes contact with the ground. So, and I think that's why we work well together, because God, no, I hate you.
I hate you.
Because I think we always have to consider that as a whole, there are forces coming up and forces coming down, and somewhere in the middle they make a hot mess.
Well, and also what people don't understand, the hoof is skin, right? So till all the new cells come out and change and the proprioception goes to the brain correctly, you have to wait till the hoof grows out of its deformity. So it's a give or take. It's a process. It's not I don't understand how people can go and address the foot in one sitting and go from you were deformed to now you're correct in all your angles and in what you have, when in fact neither the brain nor the body nor the structures in the foot or in the body can cope with that, because proprioception is reflexive, walking is reflexive. And so in order for the brain to relearn and to change and to affect that, we need to continuously re-educate that neuroplasticity to create new integration. And you and I have done it with some horses that when you slowly change the foot and you slowly change the body, over time that becomes the new reflexive pattern, and then life is easy. But you can't do it all at once.
No.
And it's a give and take, because people make giant assumption right away. And it's like instant pudding, and you can't, because again, it comes down that the hoof is skin, and if you need to regenerate new cells, in the soft tissue, it takes a while, and it trickles itself.
Well, particularly in the foot, because the blood flow isn't that great, and most of the structures in the foot are ligamentous, and ligaments don't do as well as juicy tissue like muscle, right? Because they don't have the blood supply. And even when they heal, I think we have to remember that a lot of the fascial fibers in a lot of the body are in a weave, they're in a crisscross. But when it comes to ligaments, they're uniform. They're all straight up and down in straight bundles. So when you get tearing or fraying there, the repair or the ability of the body to cope is very different.
Right. Thing is also, a lot of people always focus on the front legs, you know, or the front. You know, it's all the front.
Oh, yes.
Well, you know, it's back to front. So you fix sometimes, things change faster in the hind. The front doesn't fix as fast. And then it goes back and forth. It's a give and take between 4 legs. And it is a closed loop system.
Yes.
That's why people don't understand. You can't think like, well, I got this diagonal, okay, even if you address the hind, and then it's going to, the high-low, it's going to be better. But, you know, you do not know really how this thing is going to come out.
Remember that if we're talking about closed loop, all 4 limbs sit on the same loop. So if you have one limb that's dysfunctional, then all 4 are dysfunctional because they're compensating for that one limb. Right? So they're creating new movement patterns that are not normal, that are compensation. And I tell anybody who wants to listen, the front end is really for compensation. It is there so that the horse can compensate for what the body or the hind end might not be generating. Right? And so if you're just fixing the front end, you're never addressing what causes a lot of the problem. And a lot of the problem that we see in almost every horse, for me, I don't know about you, but is the fact that their hind end isn't available. They have no stable platform. And, you know, I talk about this all the time. If you ask a horse for a front limb and it won't give it to you, that's a red flag because it cannot redistribute a weight.
To the diagonal often.
Yes.
You can tools, diagnostics. You know, but you find some tear here, but where the tear, I totally understand you have to address it and there are drugs for that, whatever, but it often starts somewhere else, you know, and that's where it's complex. And you cannot just, you know, again, that's a discussion we had before we started now. It's people have a tendency, they
get fixated on what they think is the problem. And it's funny that you say that because I tell most of my students, if you have a horse that has a injury of any kind, don't worry about the injury because you know what? Everybody else is worried about the injury. Let them take care of the injury. You take care of the rest. Because generally it's like everything. The first thing to break is the weakest link. It doesn't mean that that's where the problem is. Unless the horse impaled itself on something, right? And that is direct cause and effect and you see the trauma. When things tear through wear and tear, it's because they're the weakest link. And they're the weakest link because somewhere else, something else is happening. And there is this, it's really hard for me as well when I talk with my students and when I talk with my clients, we have this tendency to want to fix what we think is broken. But we can fix what is broken, but if we don't address what caused it to break, then it's just going to re-break.
Well, and I think, you know, there's a lot of things about postural thing. I mean, I did hurt myself and I know exactly what I had to do to correct my problem.
Certainly not sit like that.
Yeah, but I'm happy right now. I'm not going to sit this way because I'm too hot, okay? So F off. Never mind. I will edit this one. But the thing is, you know, often when you get an injury or something, you tend to compensate on the other side. And if you have a good physical therapist, it's going to address the other side first and not necessarily just the injury. You know? And that makes a huge change in healing. It doesn't mean you don't need drugs and you need surgery for injuries or whatever. But I think with the horse, you know, the horse doesn't talk. There's all sorts of theory. You know, I mean, if you stretch me too much or you do something wrong, I'm going to tell you, you know, I'm going to kind of complain, or I'm going to find another therapist that is better. The horse has absolutely no chance to switch. So you have all those people that come up with theories, which, you know, I am totally into alternative medicine. I use it for myself. I practice it on me because I do medical Qigong on myself, blah, etc. But it's different because I have a feedback to myself and I'm self-aware. But with the horse, we'll say, oh, this guy is hurting me, or it's not going. They're going to put up with it because they have nowhere to
Well, they have nowhere to go,
Yeah.
right? And so the thing, it really is down to, and we've talked about this before. In theory, there are lots of things that are concepts that might be really effective or work really well. But it doesn't mean that when you step out, like after you've looked at what you're really trying to prove on that small micro level, when you step out and logically look back, and I do this with my students all the time, where they go, does this matter? Well, if you've questioned it, that's your intuition going, hang on a minute, maybe we have a problem.
Right.
And if you logically step it back, if you logically draw out and go, can I logically put steps back in to get to the same point? And does that still then work in my grand concept of what I think needs to happen? Then you might have something. But I think a lot of times what happens for a lot of horses is somebody has a bright idea, nobody has a better idea, and they just try it out. And because the horse can't have an opinion, or it can't express that that's too much, or I don't like that, or even if they do, they get held tighter or told to be quiet.
I think this is why it's very important. It's interesting because Simon Curtis was a farrier in England, a PhD in farriery. Been a farrier for a very long time, very well respected. Asked a few questions. Why would you say? And I didn't answer because my answer would be too long. Why would you tell people, advise other farriers or barefooters how you address the foot, and what would you do? And I think it comes down to a state of mind also of being thoughtful and observant and be respectful, and don't kind of go at it like a Mack truck or an elephant in a China.
But then that brings up a different problem.
So
because
this is a mindset that needs to happen. Don't start hacking in the foot just without thinking. You have to touch, you have to feel, you have to look at the horse, you have to trim a little bit, go back and look again or touch again. But
then there is the reality of time.
Yeah,
but
no,
that's the problem. There is a reality of time, I think, for anybody in the equine profession that provides a service where in order to make a living, they have to move faster. And as it is, people are reluctant. Like most horses should really see a farrier every 4 weeks.
Right.
But people are reluctant because they can't afford it. And so then it becomes this thing where now we're constantly chasing it. Right. And so the farrier has, or the barefoot trimmer has a list as long as his arm to get through. He doesn't have time to watch the horse move, watch it eat, take a little bit off, watch it some more. Because that's essentially in a perfect world, and I've said this to you multiple times, they would come in here, you would pull off their shoes, I would treat them, and then we'd leave them somewhere comfortable for a day.
Right.
Then we would look at what's really happening and walk them in the sand and see what they're doing.
But when I was
what
working
the foot is doing.
at Dr. Snow in Santa Ynez and Don Bertzel, when they had feet problem, what they would do, they would remove the shoe, back them with something soft, put them in a stall for a day or two, and then trim a bit and then start again. And then, especially when they had problem stuff, because you cannot see what's happening.
No, and that's the problem.
But it takes time, and you have, as a client, you have to pay for keeping the horse at stable for 2 or 3 days or a week, and a lot of people can't afford that. But I think, having said that, you still need to kind of give yourself some time. Have notes as a professional, ask the owner, where is it standing, what is it doing, blah blah, etc., and try to have a closer schedule for trimming or shoeing, because you're going to chase feet, and keep it simple. There's no reason to put the kitchen sink on and whatnot under the foot.
Well, the thing is, if you work in conjunction with somebody like me that does any kind of modality that helps the body, you wouldn't have to do the kitchen sink, because if you worked in tandem from both top and bottom, in a slow way that the tissue and the nervous system could assimilate and keep up, then you wouldn't need anything fancy, because inevitably, unless there was real structural pathology, you would find that balance for that foot, for that horse, in what it needs to do in its daily life. Well, everything
So,
about how we
yeah,
keep
exactly.
horses is abnormal. So that's where it starts, right?
Right.
And so when we try and fix the
Right.
body or the foot, we're again addressing the end result as
Right.
opposed to what caused the problem in the first
Well, and
place.
it's also what we already talked about, that looking at the sum of the parts or the part of the sum. I really think people find a lot of solution because I'm going back to, a different method of showing or looking at the nuchal ligament or looking at the pelvis. So they found something that is valuable, but then it becomes a life on its own because they don't look at the whole picture.
Right.
And then when you have more of a global thinker and you like to maybe get more broad in approach, it's not very fun for people because you cannot put a lot of factoids when you're kind of more abstract.
Right.
Anyway.
But you need
both.
You need both. Exactly.
You need both.
There
Remember, it's going to be focused about. I hate her. Get serious, man.
Yes, it's going to be focused on.
Balancing of the lower leg, the integrity, and trimming.
Shin trimming?